Good evening, good day, everybody. I hope you're all doing very well, and welcome back to the Ask Abhijit show. It's episode 170 that we are on. First of all, I would like to thank you all for helping the channel reach 800,000, 8 lakh subscribers. It's all thanks to you. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I really value your viewership. So thank you so much. And yeah, I hope you're all doing very well. It's been a while, a couple of weeks, 2 3 weeks since I did this, so it's great to be back on the live stream and to restart the show. It's not really ended, but yeah, there we are. So let me see who all is there on the live chat. I can see Tejas, hi. Echo, Rishabh Rajput, Kushti in blood, Mahitej, G Sai Siddharth, Shri Ram Upadhyay, Devan Shraval, Midnight Stalker, Nirvana Green Day fan, Sushrut, Thakur Pavan Kumar Singh Baes, Dungar Singh Chauhan, welcome back, sir. Uh, Abhinav SG, Arjun Nandakishore Tiwari, that one M8, Prajna Paramita, Harshit Badoria, Alpha, Metlus, Shashank, Gaurav Naik, Onizuka Eikichi, Yash Jain, Vivek Kumar, Milind Dandekar, Siddharth Ritesh, Om Bekerikar, Apratihat Singh, Abhishek Srivastav, Dutch Vanderlinde, God of Thunder, VS Big Tree, Mazar Chachar, hello, Virat Joglekar, Pratyush, who else is there? Geet G, Kuldeep, Anirudh Parthe, Best Thing, Rajashekaran, Influencing World, Shrikant Telang, Shashank Smash, Priyanka Jaiswar, Jitu, Shripad, Sir Whitemeat, SG, Kels, Aman Vakil, Piyush, Raju, Sagar, Bonsoir, Dhanashri, Mateo Perez, and so many other people. So I will not be able to greet you all individually by name, but thank you so much for being on the live stream. And with that, let us get into the questions. So let's go. Ask me your questions. I'm going to take questions from the live stream, from the live chat only, so that there is more interactivity and you can get. I mean, lots of you often say that when I select questions from the comments, many of your questions aren't taken. So maybe this will give you the opportunity to ask questions, and maybe I can pick up some more of those. So there we are. And with that, let's take some questions. So let's go. Fire your questions, and I'll take as many as possible. Okay, let's begin with something that is about physics. We haven't done that in a while. So, Siddharth Singh Rajpurohit says, tell us something about the Andromeda and Milky Way collision theory. Well, it's not a theory, it's a fact. It's observational evidence. The Andromeda galaxy is the closest galaxy to the Milky Way and to us, right? We can see it with with the naked eye. It's kind of faint and blurry, but it's visible to the naked eye. If the galaxy was a little bit brighter, it would be larger than the moon. When the moon shines in the sky, the Andromeda galaxy would be larger, but it's far, it's faint, and that's why it's not that visible. People may not really pay attention to it, but it's there. It's there in the night sky. It's visible, and we know from measurements of blue shift, red shift, all that, that the galaxy is coming closer and closer. It's moving towards us, and based on the distance that it's moving towards us, which we can calculate via the blue shift. Which, see, what's blue shift, what's red shift? It's the Doppler effect applied to light, applied to photons. So when the Doppler effect, right? When a train is coming towards you, the whistle, the siren, it sounds higher pitched, and it's when it's moving away from you, it sounds lower pitched. And similarly, the same thing can happen to light. The same thing applies to light, wavelengths, frequencies, all that. So we can tell that the Andromeda galaxy, from the blue shift that we see when we take light measurements, we can see that it's coming towards us, and we can measure how fast it's coming. So it is coming towards us. The two galaxies, the Milky Way and the Andromeda. Andromeda is slightly larger. The two galaxies are coming towards each other. They're moving towards each other because of the force of gravity, and because they are so close together. The expansion of the universe is not able to counteract the two galaxies coming together. Okay, so eventually, I don't know how long it will take, but in a billion, 2 billion years or so, whatever it is, I don't remember the exact number right now, but the two galaxies will eventually not collide, but they will merge. There will be no collision. There will be no hard smashing collision. Galaxies are mostly empty space. So the galaxies will come together. They'll merge. There'll be this dance, this cosmic gravitational galactic dance. Some stars will be flung around and all that, but eventually, after another billion years or so, there'll be a settled the things will settle down so somewhat, and you'll have a much larger merged galaxy that will emerge out of this, and the name that's being been given to it is Milkomeda or something like that. Yeah. So yeah, that's what's going to happen. It's not a theory. We know it's happening. The two galaxies are moving closer up together as we speak. Right now, as we speak, it's happening. It's not a theory. It's going to happen. So that's in brief about the eventual, not collision, but merger of these two galaxies, which is like way in the future. We don't have to worry about it. Not going to happen in our lifetime. So hopefully, if humans are around, there'll be. If humans are still around in a billion years or whatever time it takes, we're going to be very different from what we are today. And our descendants will think of us as the way we think about Homo erectus or whatever, right? Like almost monkey-like primitive creatures. Yeah. So that's about that. Now let's see other questions. Um, was cousin marriage prevalent in Bharat during the time of the epics? You mean the Ramayana and the Mahabharata? Well, that's something I'm not really sure about. I'm not sure cousin marriage is something that was very prevalent in India at any given point in time. In certain sections of society in the subcontinent, cousin marriage is kind of prevalent today. I think it is not something that's advisable from a medical genetic perspective. A cousin is rather close genetically, right? I mean, it's a cousin. So yeah, I'm about the Vedic period, about the Ramayana Mahabharata period. I'm not really sure if there was any such thing. Uh, I think cousin marriage, this custom, which is a fringe custom in the subcontinent, not in all areas, in some areas of the subcontinent, Pakistan, let's say, it's kind of quite prevalent. So clearly, it came into India from outside, from a different culture, right? So I don't think it's ever been part of our culture. So I'm not sure if it was ever prevalent in India before the Turkic invasions. So yeah, that's what I can say. I'm not. It's not a question that I've ever pondered on or thought about. So yeah, that's what I can say. I'm assuming it wasn't there. I'm assuming it wasn't prevalent. I, it's quite sure that it's quite clear that this custom entered into India via the Turkic invasions. You know, there was a medium, there was a vector by which this thing entered India, and I don't think it's really prevalent in India. It's definitely prevalent in Pakistan, and you see that the Pakistani population has all these birth defects and all, which comes from inbreeding. I mean, you marry your own cousin and you have kids with him or her, you're gonna have defects in your offspring, and I mean that's just genetics. You know, it's just standard medicine. That's what you're taught in your MBBS or whatever. So yeah, you see that in Pakistan. I mean, the quality of the genetic of the genes isn't great because of this. So yeah, all right. Let's take another question. Um, um, Back to nature. Put some light on quantum healing techniques becoming prevalent in the scientific world now. There is no such thing. I'm sorry to burst this bubble. There is no such thing as quantum healing or quantum consciousness or quantum whatever. Typically, when you hear this sort of terminology, it's the sign of somebody trying to pull the wool over your eyes. You know, this new age, all this stuff. I'm gonna heal you through quantum methods and all. No, that's not how it works. See, the world we live in is a macroscopic world. It's not all of the properties of the universe that we inhabit, they seem, apart from the gravitational thing, okay, all of the other properties of the world arise from the laws of quantum mechanics. For example, if you hold a crystal in your hand, it's a purely macroscopic quantum object. But well, our skin, our clothing, the world around us, it's macroscopic. It obeys the laws of Newtonian mechanics. But there is a quantum element to it as well, because everything emerges from that. But quantum healing, quantum consciousness, all of that, that is voodoo hand waving nonsense. I'm sorry if it upsets some people, but that's simply a fact. Okay, I mean, I do know about what quantum physics is, what quantum mechanics is, and what it is not. There is no such thing as quantum healing. So this is not prevalent in the scientific world. It's prevalent in the pseudo scientific world. Okay, uh, that's the long and the short of it. So yeah, if it upsets some people, I do not mean to upset you, but Facts simply are facts, unfortunately. All right. Uh, okay. Okay. Surjakanta L. Please say something about Mizoram international border with Myanmar. What's happening? It's a mess. Yeah, good question. Uh, Good question. And I'm not sure if I should talk about this, but yeah, let me give you a brief overview of what's happening. This is a sensitive matter. This is a sensitive geopolitical matter. It's not a local thing that's happening, it's a geopolitical thing. Okay, so to understand what's happening, we have to look at the map. Here we are, the map is back. So let me put the map on the screen and then we will talk. Here's the map. So, in case some of you are not aware where Mizoram is, where Myanmar is, well, you have to look at India's far east, which everyone calls the northeast because of colonial reasons. And then you have the state of Mizoram and Manipur, these two states. This is where that's where the mess is. And it's not Mizoram that's messed up, it's Manipur that's messed up. Manipur, I mean, half of Manipur at least is under foreign occupation, essentially. Okay? And understand why this is happening. This is not something the current government is, this mess has not been created by the current government. This mess has been created by the incredibly retarded policies that the former Indian governments, previous Indian governments have implemented since 1947. Okay? So the mess is because of that. And of course, it all started in the 1850s or thereabouts with the British occupiers of India. They messed this place up. So what's happening right now? There is a government in Myanmar. Okay, it is a military government. It's, you could say, the military junta, they call it. People think of it as the junta. It's not the junta, it's the junta. That's the term, junta. It's a Spanish term. So you have a military dictatorship in Myanmar. Okay, and you have various forms of resistance to this military dictatorship. So we have, and then you have the Chin state. The Chin state is something that borders Mizoram, and that's where you have the Chinese origin people who live there. Okay, these people are the Chinzo ethnic group, also known as the Cookies, also known as the Zomi and the Mizos. All right, this is a Chinese origin ethnic group. They originated somewhere in the Yunnan region or beyond, in present day China, and they somehow in the past, in the recent few centuries, they moved into this region. And these Kin Zo, Cookie Zo, Zo Me people, whatever they are, this entire grouping of individuals, these people, they are not Burmese. Okay, they are mainly located in Burma, but they are not Burmese. They do not practice Burmese culture. They don't speak the Burmese language, and they are fighting the Burmese government. Okay, and they want to create a nation of their own. And these are the people who have, during colonization, British occupation of the region, because the British also occupied Burma. So during the British occupation of this region, they converted these people to Christianity. So they're all Christians, and they want to create a nation in Christ. And they're fighting the government of Burma, but they're also fighting the government of Bangladesh and the government of India. Okay, this is a separatist movement, and it has funding from somewhere. Okay, let's call it somewhere. Funding is coming in. They're getting arms, ammunition, social media support. They're getting leadership support. I mean, coordination, all that from somewhere, and not from this region. Okay, that's what's happening now. The Burmese government, the military government, is obviously fighting against these people because they want to carve out a separate country from this region. And the fighting is happening close in the Chin state. Chin state. Let's see if we can Chin state, Myanmar. Let's see if we can get a. Yeah, it's okay. You can see it now. It's highlighted over here. So this is the region where much of the fighting is happening. And there's other fighting happening near the Chinese border as well, the Yunnan border and all. So it's a big mess. Okay, the government of Myanmar is not in total control of the country. Chin state, apparently, it looks like they have mostly evicted the government of Myanmar. So there is fighting happening there. The Myanmarese government is sometimes using the air force to bomb these separatists and all that. And when this happens, there is this influx of people. They call them refugees, apparently, who move into the Indian border, who move across the border into India. Much of it is happening in Mizoram. And then what the government of Mizoram does is that it doesn't take the biometrics of these people, even though the central government has told them, they have refused to do it. So the Mizoram government is not taking biometrics, and what they are doing is that they are simply pushing these people north into Manipur. And then these so-called refugees, they set up villages in Manipur, and they say that we are cookies. And then they are given scheduled tribe or whatever status, and then they take over the land. So over half of Manipur is occupied by these people, and we know that they are fighting a terrorist insurgency against the native people of Manipur. Over half of Manipur is under foreign terrorist occupation. All right, so that's what's happening right now. That's as much as I will say. And yeah, so it's there is no short term solution to this. When you have 8 to 10 lakh foreign squatters on your territory, it's not going to be easy to evict them. It's going to take at least a decade or two. This problem was created over a century, maybe more than a century. It started in the 1850s or so, okay, after the British started occupying these territories, when the kingdom of Manipur lost its sovereignty, when they had to accommodate British political agents on their soil. That's when this influx started. Okay, so the kings of Manipur in those days were forced to start giving land to these foreign settlers. And the government of India, after 1947, after 1949, when Manipur became part of India, the government of India was completely clueless about the far east of India, which we call the northeast. So they simply continued the British policies of punishing the indigenous people of Manipur by settling foreigners. Okay? And that's how. And in the last decade, it looks like almost 500,000 more terrorists have come and settled down. So that's an ongoing problem. This is going to take time to solve. And these individuals, let's whatever they are, the Zomi people or whatever, they want a separate nation, and they have tremendous international funding and backing. I mean, they are a ragtag bunch of illiterates, okay, who have no allegiance to any nation, but they are very well coordinated, they are very well funded, they have apparently inexhaustible supplies of ammunition and arms, and they have a lot of support, if you see, from certain quarters, which is visible on social media, in certain reports put out by think tanks and all that. So this is a geopolitical issue. Okay, this is designed to destabilize India, to set the far east of India on fire, and also to destabilize China. That's so the weird part of it. In the past, the Chinese have funded and fomented separatist insurgencies all across the far east of India, the northeast of India. You have, I can share images if I Google them of separatist leaders at the Great Wall of China, at the so-called Great Wall of China. The Chinese have done this for a long time, but right now, this what's happening right now, I don't think I may be wrong, but the sense I get is that the Chinese may not really be involved in this particular thing, although they'll be happy about it, and they may want to explore avenues of how to use this against India. But this most likely doesn't have too much of a Chinese hand in it. Somebody else and somebody more powerful is probably behind this. And that's all I will say about this as of now. Okay. Let us see some other questions. I mean, Aryan Rathor asks, are we close to the Third World War? Okay, so let's examine the flashpoints in the world, right? What are the where is the world messed up? Let's once again go to the map, because that's what we do on this channel. So here's the map of the world, the globe. So where are the geopolitical flashpoints right now? Well, we know that there's a conflict brewing and ongoing, simmering in the Middle East, the Israel versus Hamas and Hezbollah conflict, right? We have that. Now that's kind of simmering right now. It's not a very hot conflict. It's kind of going the slow war route once again. The Israelis have some presence in Gaza and all that, and they've captured certain, places, and they seem to be intent on eventually wiping out Hamas. So that's something that's going on. There is some involvement of Hezbollah in Lebanon as well in this. So there is a conflict here in the Middle East, and the Americans have deployed two aircraft carrier strike groups in this region, one in the Mediterranean Sea, the other one in the Sea of Saurashtra, which is erroneously called the Arabian Sea. Okay, but Tehran is out of range for some reason. So they have deployed essentially the largest naval task force since the Second World War, as a warning to everyone not to cross certain lines. So the Middle East is kind of stabilized right now. The other big flashpoint is Ukraine. Once again, we are witnessing a very slow war there, right? Putin, Mr. Putin, we know what his objective is. His objective is to denazify and whatever eyes Ukraine, denazify Ukraine, and obviously to effect a regime change in Kiev to get rid of the puppet Zelensky and install his own puppet there. Okay, and maybe capture some territory. So he is eminently capable of doing that, but he's choosing not to. Okay, when the war began in February 22, right? The Russian forces were on the outskirts of Kiev, but they pulled back, and that's a whole story which I will not go into right now. But even Mr. Putin is going the slow is taking the slow war route because he's simply waiting for the funding to dry up for Ukraine, and then he can just walk in. And he's prepared to wait as long as it takes. He's not in a hurry. Okay, so it may take another 3 years, another 5 years. Who knows? So it'll go on. So it's kind of frozen conflict right now, and we'll see how the Israel thing also goes. That's another potential frozen conflict. Well, the Middle East is a frozen conflict. It's always in crisis, and it's all because of external factors, as we know, as my regular viewers would know. There's another flashpoint in the Taiwan region. There's another flashpoint, as we know, in the India Tibet border, the undemarcated India Tibet border, which ranges all the way from Kashmir and Ladakh all the way to Arunachal Pradesh, right? That's another long major flashpoint. Um, so, yeah, that's kind of it. What else do we have? We have tensions in Africa. The Cold War has moved to Africa. There have been coups in the Sahel region, in the coup belt of Africa, which we have discussed. So yeah, so that's the situation right now. I don't think we are really close to a global conflagration, a World War III, but we aren't very far from it. Also, it will only take a couple of major mistakes, or just one major mistake from somebody, to set off something very big. So yeah, that's the deal. So I'm personally not of the opinion that we are very close to the Third World War. When the Ukraine conflict started, it looked like something could happen, but the Americans have wisely not put boots on the ground. They're using proxies. Ukraine is a proxy, and other proxies also are there in the line, so pipeline. So yeah, as long as it's a proxy conflict, it's not gonna cross certain lines. The Israel issue also is kind of simmering down. There was talk earlier of Israel potentially having to resort to the last use of, I mean, the Samson option, the use of nuclear weapons. That would cause, I mean, retaliation from other nuclear powers, potentially Iran. Iran may possibly have nukes, possibly. Okay, so right now it's kind of under control, but the tension, the conflict is always just below the surface. So I don't think we are very close to World War III. I hope it never happens, but there we are right now. Okay. Simant Kukriti says Israel and the US have accused Iran of hampering the India Middle East corridor, India Middle East Europe trade and transportation corridor, whereas the loser in this is China. My thoughts. Okay, once again, let's go to the map. Here's the map. So the India Middle East Europe trade and transportation corridor was something that was agreed upon. It was announced during the G20 summit, which happened a couple of months ago, in the last 2 months in New Delhi. I was there. So it was announced, and it was announced by the US. So the US had thrown its full weight behind it. And this was supposed to be a trade and transportation corridor that would link India with the Middle East region, Oman, Saudi Arabia, all that. And this corridor would then go into Israel via Jordan, bypass Turkey, and go into Greece. And this was going to be, it can still be a game changer when it comes to trade and transportation. And it could be a big alternative, a major and attractive alternative to the Chinese BRI, Belt and Road Initiative. And as we know, many nations in Europe are now pulling out of the BRI. The BRI hasn't really done much. I mean, the Pakistan leg of the BRI, the CPEC, China Pakistan Economic Corridor, has not really fructified. It hasn't really happened. It's not really going anywhere. And the one of the major problems for the BRI is the Ukraine conflict, because now the the BRI, the build, all the infrastructure was supposed to pass through Ukraine. It's an enormous country in Europe, and because of the conflict, it's not happening. So the IMEC is a potential great alternative to the BRI, and one that is attractive to lots of European nations because China is not involved. So I'm not sure if Iran is behind this. I mean, who set off the Middle East conflict, which we are currently seeing? I mean, we know that Hamas and Hezbollah have very deep and very strong ties with Iran. Uh, so it is possible. But the sore loser in this is not China. If the IMEC doesn't happen, it's actually good for China, right? So this is an evolving situation. It's still evolving as we speak. It's going to keep on changing. If the Israel conflict can simmer down, then the IMEC can still go ahead. The Saudis actually wanted this to happen within a month and a half of the announcement. They wanted the construction of the infrastructure to start immediately. So Saudi Arabia is very bullish on this. Greece is bullish on this. Italy, during the G20 summit, Italy announced and informed the Chinese that they are pulling out of the BRI. It would have been great for Italy as well. So I think it can still go ahead. But as long as the IMEC doesn't happen, it's actually good for China. So that's the situation, and it's gonna keep evolving. Okay. Um. Okay. Let's take a question from Tejas. Why did Mr. Gandhi not become the Prime Minister of independent India? How did he become famous overnight after returning from Africa, from South Africa? Uh, so let's take the second question first. How did Mr. Gandhi become famous overnight after returning from South Africa? So listen, when somebody becomes a superstar overnight, you have to understand it doesn't happen without a great amount of groundwork and a great amount of media and other activities. It doesn't happen overnight. It's so hard for someone to become famous. There are so many people who desire fame, who crave fame, and they never become famous, and it upsets them so much. It hurts them. It's so painful. No matter how much they try, they don't get famous. And then there are some people who become famous overnight, magically. You cannot become famous unless there are two ways of becoming famous. You either have to put in a lot of work for a long period of time, a decade, 2 decades, yeah, or you can accelerate this process using a certain fuel, which is money. Now, to become globally famous, or let's say how to become famous overnight in an enormous subcontinent sized nation like undivided India, it would either take somebody a few decades of hard work, or an enormous amount of money, or the cooperation of the media and the government. At that time, the government was that of the British occupiers of India, the British government of India, the British occupation government of India. Yeah. So, how did he become famous overnight? That's something we need to look into history and examine these questions afresh. And that's why I have been saying the things I've been saying. That most likely the British wanted Mr. Gandhi to take over the leadership of the Congress Party. The Congress Party itself was a creation of the British. It was founded by Alan Hume, who was a British official in occupied India. The Congress Party was a British creation, and they wanted most likely Mr. Gandhi to become the overall leader of the Congress Party because they had observed his actions in South Africa, his activities in South Africa for a quarter century. I mean, nearly 25 years, right? And they were confident that he would be a valuable asset for them. Uh, so most likely that's the thing. So once he came to India, he was all the newspapers, all the media started showering praise on him. Such a great freedom fighter from Africa, South Africa, who did such great work. And when it's all over the newspapers and they constantly say the same things day in and day out, the person becomes famous. It doesn't take a lot. And all the newspapers were controlled by, obviously, by the British government, by the occupation government of India, the British government. So they would do what they were told. So, and the Congress leadership, the Congress party leadership, well, they also, you know, could have been controlled. See, the British created the Congress party for a certain purpose. They wanted to stage manage and control the freedom struggle in India. They knew that they learned the lessons of 1857, that this can very quickly go out of control. And when the Indians take up arms, if the Indians decide to take up arms and do or die, it'll take 24 to 48 hours to eliminate all foreign occupiers in India. That's how long, that's as long as it will take, 24 to 48 hours. So they had to give the Indians the impression that there was this political movement, freedom movement, that was on their side, that was fighting the British, but they wanted it to be completely non-violent and toothless. So I think that explains things. I mean, you can read between the lines a little bit. I haven't left a lot to your imagination, but that. And why did Mr. Gandhi not become PM of independent India? Because, well, it's always better to be behind the scenes and have more power. You know, when in 1946 the vote happened in the Congress party, all the regional Congress committees, they came together and they decided to vote for the person who would become the first prime minister of the Dominion of India, Dominion status. So then we know that everyone except one or two voted for Sardar Patel. There were a couple of abstentions, and then Mr. Gandhi decided that he will go on a fast till death unless everybody agrees that Mr. Nehru becomes the prime minister. So he arm twisted everybody, and Mr. Nehru was made the prime minister of India, despite not getting a single vote. Do you know that in 1947, when Mr. Gandhi pulled off this coup, he was not even a member of the Congress party? He was not a member of the Congress party. He had resigned earlier, like several years earlier. So a person who is not even a member of this political party had so much power over it that he forced it to go against its own democratic vote. So he was the person behind the scenes who held the actual levers of power. Now, I'll not go into details about how power works. Power is a very invisible thing, it's very hard to comprehend. Okay, but he was the real power in the Congress party, despite not being a member of the Congress party. He always wanted to be behind the scenes, the real power who doesn't have any responsibility that the prime minister actually would have. So imagine that you have a situation where one person is the official leader of a nation. Official leadership comes with a lot of restrictions and rules and regulations and do's and don'ts. And then there is a person who holds the actual power but has no official position. Then that person is free to do anything. So only those who understand power will get why sometimes it's better to be behind the scenes. Like when the great Vishnugupta Chanakya was essentially the power in India, true power in India, even though Chandragupta Maurya was the official emperor of India, that sort of thing. So Mr. Gandhi did not want to become prime minister. He wanted to be the power behind the prime minister, the real power in India. So that's kind of how it was. And probably the British also wanted Mr. Nehru to be the prime minister. He was a very um, he was a great Anglophile. He was somebody they trusted, and so on and so forth. So yeah, that is the deal. That is the deal. All right, all right. Okay. Brian Oblivion. The whole Indian revolution was kind of a farce to begin with, a passive revolution that doesn't work without power behind you. Well, that's, yeah. I mean, Indians don't get this because Indians have been indoctrinated by the education system in worshipping individuals. Yeah. See, the same thing even goes for sport and all that. Indians don't really understand sports in great detail, but they worship individuals. And if you say something about that individual, if you point out certain things factually, they will ignore the facts and they'll attack you. So that's what happens. So yeah, the Indian Revolution was a farce. After 1857, it was all stage managed by the British, a passive, non-violent revolution. I mean, come on, what kind of a joke is that? But yeah, I mean, Indians don't get it. I mean, That's what the education system has done to Indians. First of all, it has created these personality cults around people like Mr. Gandhi, Mr. Nehru, and so on. That these are godlike figures. You have to worship them. Don't question anything about them. Don't raise questions. And secondly, the education system has taken away the ability of Indians to think critically. Indians simply don't know how to think. The first thing you do to take away someone's ability to think critically is to dissuade them from asking questions. That's what the Indian education system does. You don't ask questions. You're not allowed to ask questions. So then you simply take things at face value. You stop asking questions, and that's what happens. So Indians simply don't ask questions. I mean, thankfully there are people who are thinking differently now, but it's still a long way to go. So yeah, I agree. Um, right. What else? What else? What else? There are lots and lots of questions, but let me. Um, Javed says, "Is this Xi Jinping's weakest phase as China's leader? What are the chances of him stepping down from the post of the general secretary or the overall leader of the CCP?" I think Mr. Xi has really consolidated his power and his position in the Chinese Communist Party apparatus. He has removed anybody who could be a potential threat or potential challenger to him. Uh, he has purged the army. There are people who disappear for the smallest of reasons. Yeah, I mean where's the defense minister of China? What happened to him? Where did he go? Hmm? What happened to the foreign minister? Apparently, he had an affair with some media lady. Come on. As long as he does his job properly, who cares? But these are all excuses, all pretexts to get rid of various individuals. You find some excuse and you get rid of them. So what Mr. Xi Jinping has done is that he has consolidated power tremendously. So within the Chinese Communist Party, uh, he has eliminated much of the opposition, any potential opposition, even the hint of a dream of anyone opposing him uh, has been removed. But obviously, there are smart people in the CCP. The CCP is a very tough environment, really, really tough environment. Dog eats dog, that sort of thing. During his rise, Mr. Xi Jinping made lots and lots of enemies. I'm sure he has kept lists and he has marginalized or purged most of them. But yeah, there will still be enemies. There will still be people who will look for the slightest chance of weakness or the slightest error, and then something could happen. So I don't think it's his weakest phase as China's leader, but who knows what's brewing within the Chinese Communist Party? Who knows? There's When it comes to a dictatorship like China, there's always the possibility that anytime something could happen and the leader could be replaced. I mean, okay, let me give you a very bad example. There's an organization in the US, a company called OpenAI. What happened yesterday? Sam Altman was suddenly removed. He was fired. He was sacked from his position as the CEO. He's out. So these things can happen overnight. I know it's a bad example because this is not a dictatorship. One is a company in the US and one is the Chinese dictatorship. But yeah, my point is things can happen suddenly. So I don't think it's the weakest phase of Xi Jinping. It may be his strongest phase actually, but all it takes is one error, one mistake, or one setback. You make a stupid error, everything comes crashing down. If Mr. Xi Jinping, let's say, hypothetically orders an invasion of Taiwan, or orders or starts a war with India, and things don't go well, then he looks weak. And in a nation like China, a dictatorship like China, the greatest sin is failure. Right? In India, your leaders can fail hundreds of times. Nobody says anything. They're gods. I'm talking about people like Gandhi and Nehru and whoever else. They can fail, and maybe some other leaders in certain political parties in India today. I'm not taking names, so all right. But yeah, certain leaders can fail 78 times and nobody says anything. They still worship them. In a place like China, one failure and you're out. So that's always a sword that hangs over the Chinese leaders. But that's what makes that nation and that party so ruthless and so efficient. But yeah, it's dangerous and it's scary if you're in there. Okay. Um Let's see what else. Okay, let us see this question. I haven't read it. Let me see. Aryan Vikram Singh. If the Aryan invasion, migration, tourism, etc. theory is wrong, and it was the Harappans who migrated eastward, then why do we see a decline in the Indus culture, such as the infrastructure, town planning, drainage system, etc.? Hmm. Good question. We need to ask these questions and have them answered. So, who are these Harappans? I mean, we are Harappans. We are the descendants of the Harappans, first of all. Okay. Um, okay, so okay, let's go back to, let's say, 5,000, 6,000 years before today. 6,000 years before today, you had the great cities. Okay, let's go to the map and check out where this happened. So you had this great phase of India's civilization in the west, north and the west of India. Okay, the northernmost Indus Valley or Harappan or whatever site, Saraswati Sindhu site, uh, archaeological site that we have discovered is in northern Afghanistan, almost on the Tajikistan border. Okay, and the southernmost such archaeological sites are found in northern Maharashtra. This went all the way into Madhya Pradesh, and all the way west, almost into Iran. Enormous region, okay, where you had this flowering phase of Indian civilization called the Harappan phase, Saraswati Sindhu phase, Sapta Sindhu phase, whatever you want to call it, Indus Valley phase. Right. So the greatest, uh, the mature Harappan phase, so called. So see, the oldest archaeological site of the Harappan phase is found in Bharata in Haryana. That is about 9,500 years old, almost 10,000 years old. Okay, and the mature phase was around 5,000 6,000 years before today. That's when you had the great metropolitan era. Everything was, it was a great urbanization of this entire region, and standardization of weights and measures, and urbanization means great cities with multi-storied buildings and incredibly advanced hydro engineering, drainage systems, flush toilets, um, you know technology and all that. And even the villages were like that, but not that big. So tremendous urbanization. There was a phase. Okay, uh, so the British and the Indian historians also call this the Indus Valley civilization, Harappan civilization, and so on and so forth. And this was centered around the rivers in western and northern western India, the Sapta Sindhu region, the seven rivers, out of which six still exist. One has disappeared, but we can still find its dry riverbed, which was the greatest river of India, the largest river, the Saraswati, way bigger than the Sindhu. Okay, enormous river, the mother of floods, and so on. So what happened is this: we know that these great cities were all abandoned eventually. Yeah, they are in ruins today. We still find the ruins, and over 95% of the ruins have not even been excavated. Over 95% of the archaeological sites that are known to exist have not even been explored yet. And most of them are along the dry riverbed of the Saraswati. So, why was all this abandoned? What happened? It's because of climate change, my friends. Climate change. About 8,000 years ago, 6,000 BC or so, the Indian monsoon was way heavier than what it is today. And around 6,000 BC, the Indian monsoon started declining monotonically, means slow, steady decline over the centuries and millennia. And eventually, around 1500 BC or so, much of the Saraswati had dried out. And there was much much reduced monsoon in the region, which could no longer sustain these enormous cities and all the settlements been built up in this region. So what you saw was a slow, steady, gradual de-urbanization and migration over a period of almost 1,500 years. It did not happen overnight. That overnight everyone decided to leave the cities. No, it happened slowly, steadily, gradually. Lots of these the people who lived in this region, they migrated eastwards, northwards. Some of them even migrated westwards. Okay, and it's interesting that around 5,000 years before today, we find the sudden influx of Indian genetics in Australia. We also have the Yamnaya invasion of Europe, And you also have the sudden appearance of Indian cattle in the Middle East region and even in Egypt. All of this happens around the same time, starting around 5,000 years before today, and it goes on almost until 1000 BC. This migratory pattern out of India, and also lots of migrations within India. Okay, so these people who had to migrate away from this region, they settled in various parts of the world. Most of them came in eastwards, but many of them went northwards, many of them went westwards, and some of them even ended up in Australia. So that's what happened. Because of the decline in the monsoon, the rivers in this region could no longer sustain such enormous cities and settlements, and people slowly moved out of this region over a period of more than 1,000 years. It was just very slow, gradual process. So that's why these cities eventually got abandoned, and you saw a decline in all the infrastructure, town planning, blah blah blah, all that. That is what happened, and that's what the history. I mean, if you read various scientific papers dealing with individual issues, you will see the pattern. But our great historians don't want to write about this. They don't want to speak about this. They tell you a different story. So that is what happened. All right. Okay. Let's have some more questions. Okay. This is the conversation, but fog of war. The fog of war is the confusion that happens when you are in the battlefield and there's this battle going on, and in the middle of the battle, with all the things that are flying around and you're being fired upon, you're firing upon someone, there are explosions everywhere, things get confused, and your plans may get thrown out of the window, the communication lines may not all be open. So that is the confused situation that you get when a battle starts and when you are in the middle of it. That's called the fog of war. Okay. uh, Rostam Farokhzad says the Hindu kingdom of Champa, which was in Vietnam, built great temples with beautiful architecture, and they still stand to this day in a ruined state. What's our government doing to preserve them? I wish I knew. I think there are certain efforts being made to preserve some temples. First of all, let's take a look at the map so that everyone understands what we're talking about. We know where the Indian subcontinent is, which is our homeland. I mean, many of us. Uh, and then we let me deselect this. All right. Okay. So the region we're talking about is Vietnam. It's Southeast Asia, and you had this great kingdom called Champa, which was one of the longest reigning empires or kingdoms in this region, almost 1500 years. And for a long time, they were vassals of the Chola Empire. Okay. And this was a Hindu kingdom, and they built great temples and great architecture in this region. And you have the temples in Mison. Let me see if I can find this. Mison, Vietnam. Mison. So Mison, there are temples here. There we go. Shiva temples. Uh, Mison. I'm not sure where the temples are because I've never looked here. But yeah, what is this? There you have it. There you have it. So you have these temples here. These are favorite the Shiva temples in this region. Cham. As you can see, much of their culture is still deeply influenced by Indian culture, and it is their culture. It's their culture as much as ours, and it's a very unique, localized manifestation of our culture. So yeah, this is the group of temples in Mison, and I believe that the Indian government has asked the ASI to help the government of Vietnam to preserve and to some extent restore these temples. And I'm sure something like that is also being done when it comes to the great temples in Angkor Wat uh, in Cambodia, and maybe even the great temples that still exist in Indonesia. So I think there is uh, some activity in this regard. Maybe some initiatives are being taken, but I'm not really clear as to what the extent of this is. I think the government of India should definitely take a great amount of interest in preserving these manifestations of Indian culture beyond the subcontinent. There's so much of it in the subcontinent that we are no longer in control of. Vikramshila is in Bangladesh. There is so much in Afghanistan, so much in Pakistan, which is being actively destroyed. But when it comes to these nations and cultures that are friendly, still friendly to us, we should certainly cooperate with them and help them in preserving uh, these temples and other great ancient architecture. Uh, so yeah, it's something we should do, but I'm not sure to what extent it is being done. There is something that's being done. I know about it, but how far, what is the extent of that, I'm not sure. Yeah. Okay, let us see. Okay, another question. This is my best thing. Did Cholas spread Sanskrit in Southeast Asia, or Sanskrit influenced Tamil? Because Thai and Khmer scripts are descendants of Tamil Pallava Grantha script. Yeah, so all these scripts that you see in Southeast Asia, whether it is the Cambodian script, the Burmese script, uh, the Thai and the Khmer scripts and all, these are all descended from various Indian scripts. Uh, and these Indian scripts, whether it is the Pallava script, Grantha script, or whatever script, all of these scripts are descended from Brahmi. Okay, and Brahmi is way older. So that's how it is. So we know, look, when it comes to Southeast Asia, let's once again put Southeast Asia on the map. Well, let's display the map. So during the time of the Maurya Empire, during the time of Ashoka the Great, our great emperor, this region was called Suvarna Bhumi. Okay, Southeast Asia. You go to Bangkok today, the airport, the main airport there is called Suvarna Bhumi Airport. So this region was called Suvarna Bhumi. And the first contact between Indian civilization and the people of this region happened at least 3,000 years ago. And the contact was between the great people of Odisha, and this region. So Odisha had this great maritime tradition, and they had this great mercantile tradition, merchants. So they would send merchants and traders on ships to these regions, all the way to Cambodia, Vietnam, of course, Myanmar, Thailand, all of that. And you know, various kingdoms were established here, which were Indian and Hindu kingdoms. Kingdom of Funan, for example, the Champa kingdom, like we spoke about, and many more, many more. And of course, Indonesia. All of these regions were influenced. So it was the people of Kalinga that started this, and then you 1,000 years before today, you had the Chola conquest of this region, and lots of these. It The Chola conquest extended all the way to the Philippines. So at various points in time, you would have had different various scripts that were used in these regions, and all of these scripts would have come from India. So it's not just one script, but there were multiple scripts. There is this inscription that was discovered in the Philippines. I forget the name of the inscriptions. It's on a gold plate. It is in Sanskrit, I believe, with some Filipino local words or something. And I'm not sure which script it is, but it is definitely not the Grantha script. It's a different script. So you had different scripts that were used at different points in time over a period of almost 3,000 years, at least 2,500 years. And the Cholas, they conquered this region about 1,000 years ago. So before the Cholas even came into the picture, you had other scripts that were being used. Now, so the use of Sanskrit in this region started with the contact from Kalinga about 3,000 years ago. That's when it started, at least 3,000 years ago. When it comes to the Cholas, there is absolutely no evidence that they used anything except for Sanskrit, because this entire region, Southeast Asia, was already very familiar with Sanskrit. Sanskrit was the high language, the prestige language across the region, and the Cholas also were extremely familiar with Sanskrit. Uh, and there are regions today, for example, in Malaysia, etc., Singapore, where you have lots of Tamil speaking people. But those Tamil speaking people migrated to these regions quite recently during the British occupation of these regions. Okay, so there was a time when India was occupied by the British, Burma was occupied by the British, and much of this region, Southeast Asia, was also under British occupation. That's when the British transported Indians as slaves to various parts of the world, and that's how many Tamils got settled in this region. There are Tamils who have settled in Myanmar as well. So all of this is recent migration. Okay, that's how Tamil entered these areas. But historically, it was Sanskrit. Okay, let's take another question. Um, Feminist assassin says, "What do you think of the coaching mafia destroying lives of students? Many students are committing suicide." The coaching mafia exists because of the education system. We need to reform the education system so that this coaching mafia becomes completely irrelevant. That's what needs to happen. The coaching mafia is a well, when you have these high stakes exams, which students need to pass to get a job in the government or whatever, you know, then you will have these coaching classes and coaching mafia. We need to have a better system. I'm not saying do away with all the exams, but we need a better system. And I mean, I'll not go into the details right now. I have at least 3 episodes of Ask Abhijit which deal entirely with education. I think it's around somewhere around episode 30. So if you're truly interested in understanding what is wrong with the education system, what needs to be done, and all that, check out those episodes. It's somewhere around episode 30 or something. Um, Check it out. Okay. Um, oh, what? Okay, let's see this question by Sagar. Is it possible human history is beyond 30, 40,000 years or even more, with Mahabharata being a major event, but the West has changed the timeline to suit them? Well, I can only answer on the basis of evidence. Do we have evidence of the Mahabharata? Well, one of the evidences of the Mahabharata that we have discovered in the archaeological record is the submerged city of Dwarka. For decades, our great historians laughed at us that the Mahabharata is a collection of myths. It's all imagination and mythology. It has nothing to do with the real world. It's just a story that somebody came up with. Well, in the Mahabharata, there is this event in which Arjun visits Dwarka, and there is this massive tectonic seismic event, an earthquake, huge earthquake, and the entire city of Dwarka collapses and is submerged under the sea. Okay, and people laughed at that because we have a city of Dwarka in Western India, in Saurashtra. It's there. So what are you talking about? The city is there. And then somebody, Dr. S.R. Rao of the ASI, decided, let me look beyond the shore of the coast of Dwarka and see if I can find something. And he found an entire submerged city there. So clearly the city was submerged, and then a new city was rebuilt off the coast. On whatever land remained. And they have done a little bit of research. They've done some carbon dating, and one of the pieces of wood that was dredged out of this submerged city, it was about 8,500 years old. Okay, it doesn't mean the city went under the ocean 8,500 years ago. It means that piece of wood is that old. But so it gives you a certain date limit or date range when this would have happened. So this seismic event, this event of the city sinking under the ocean, happened less than 8,500 years ago, roughly less than 8,000 years ago. So that gives us a certain timeline within which the Mahabharata would have happened. Okay, I'm not saying the Mahabharata happened 8,000 years ago. The date is a issue of great controversy because there are so many people who have come up with different dates. So I'll not go into that. So from the hard evidence that we have, it is clear the Mahabharata happened sometime in the last 8,000 years. We have to go by hard evidence only. We cannot let our imagination run wild. Human history is at least 100,000 years old. At least. It's way older than 30, 40,000 years. The oldest evidence of anatomically modern humans, Homo sapiens, is from Northern Africa. Algeria, the cave of Jebel Irhoud. It's about, how long is it? How old is it? About 4 lakh years? 400,000 years, roughly. I may be wrong. I have not looked at it for a long time, but something like that. So Homo sapiens has been around for about that long. So and our pre-Homo sapiens ancestors have been around for 2-3 million years. The human chimpanzee divergence happened about 4 million years ago. Don't quote me on this, but somewhere around those lines. And the chimpanzees, we know genetically, are our closest relatives. And so the divergence happened around 4 or so million years ago. And after that, all the history that we have is the history of our post divergence ancestors, the ancient humans. So human history is very old, but we have lost most of it. What we know is something around the good evidence we have is something that happened in the past 10-15,000 years, the last ice age, and after that. Um, so the Mahabharata definitely was a historical event. It happened somewhere in the last 8,000 years. Okay, the Ramayana happened before that, before the Mahabharata. But when exactly, once again, we're not sure. And there are people who have their favorite dates and all that. I will not go into the controversy. I'm sick and tired of that fighting and bickering. Okay, so I'm not gonna go and venture a date. But yeah, that's a deal. So I don't think it's 30, 40, 50,000 years ago. Some people make claims of God knows what. I will not take names and I will not go into that at all. But from the evidence that we have, it's clear that the Mahabharata happened somewhere in the last 8,000 years, probably closer to today than closer to 8,000 years, probably. Yeah, so that's the deal. That's what I can tell you. Yash Singh Badoria says, "What's more important for winning a war, technology or willingness to fight?" So first of all, you should be willing to engage in the war. If someone comes and attacks you or someone is doing something naughty, they have to be dealt with. So first of all, first of all, my dear friends, you need leadership. A bunch of people, there is no decision by consensus. There is no decision through democracy. Okay? There is decisions like these are only taken when you have good leadership. So first of all, you need leadership, the right kind of leadership, the leadership that has the appetite for risks and the appetite for taking hard decisions. So that is the willingness to fight. It means you have good leadership and leaders who can make hard decisions. Secondly, you can have the bravest people and you can have the largest armies. That's completely useless unless you have the right technology. Okay. So in the 21st century, soon you may not even need human soldiers. You will have robots. They don't even look human. You'll have loitering drones and all kinds of drone swarms and all that. You'll have missiles of various kinds. You will have UAVs, uh, unmanned aerial vehicles. Once again, fighter planes will be entirely remote controlled or AI based. And you may not need human soldiers. You have those robotic dogs with machine guns on them who can go and do things. So eventually, it's going to be all about technology. Also, you will have cyber war and all that. But historically, before all this technology came up, you still needed human soldiers and the willingness to fight and good leadership and well trained and disciplined armies. But once again, if you had two forces, let's say both have the same number of soldiers, both are disciplined, both are well trained, in that case, the tipping factor was the technology. So that is how it goes. You need great leadership. You need the willingness to fight. You need well trained, disciplined armed forces, which means that train regularly as if every day is war. Okay. No flab, no fat. Train every day. And you need the right technology. Technology is always the deciding factor when you have evenly matched sides. So there you are. Aryan Vikram Singh says, if the Harappans spoke Sanskrit, then why did they write in their own script and not in Sanskrit? And when did the Devanagari script began being used? So understand the difference between a language and a script. Yeah. A script is simply a container. It's a vehicle. Okay. Let me show you something interesting. Okay, let us go to Google and do a Google search. Let me show you something. Where is Google? Google. All right, here we are. Okay, let me show you something. There is something called Soyombo. Soyombo script. Okay. Soyombo script is okay. Statutory warning: Wikipedia is not always reliable, but I'm going to just use it for convenience here. Do not trust everything that is on Wikipedia, especially when it comes to India. It's very biased against India. But here we are. The Soyombo script is a Mongolian script. Okay, it was developed by a Mongolian monk in 1696 to write Mongolian. It can also be used to write Tibetan and Sanskrit. Okay, and this is the Soyombo script. It's actually the Swayambhu script. And one of the symbols in the script, the Swayambhu symbol, is the national symbol of Mongolia. My point is this, that a script is simply a container, it's a vehicle. It can be used to write any language essentially. You can use a Devanagari script to write English if you want. It won't be a great fit for it, but you can do it. And today you can even write Sanskrit and Hindi text in the Latin script, the English script, right? So a script is actually immaterial. Sanskrit has the Sanskrit language has lots of scripts have been used to write Sanskrit. The Kharoshti script, the Devanagari script, the Sharda script, the Grantha script, the any script that exists in India from north to south can be used to write Sanskrit. So one of those scripts was possibly the so-called Harappan script. So what? So what? The Devanagari script came much later. I'm not sure when it emerged, but sometime in the last 1000 years. There have been so many scripts in India and around India. The Tibetan script, for example, it's another script that can be used to write Sanskrit. So please understand that a specific script being used to write Sanskrit or any language doesn't mean that language was prevalent or not prevalent there. A script is simply a vehicle. It's simply a container. It doesn't matter. You can use the Devanagari script to write Tamil also, or Tibetan also, and vice versa. You can use the Tamil script to write Sanskrit. Of course you can. So understand, a script is simply a vehicle, it's simply a container. All right? And we don't know what the Harappans spoke. I believe it's most likely Sanskrit, but and it all depends on the decipherment of the so-called Harappan script. And there has been some progress on that and lots of claims. But yeah, once it is properly deciphered and it is established beyond any doubt what language it encodes, then we will know what language was spoken in those times, in that region. All right. I don't know why I get this question so often. Am I of Russian descent? I am pure Indian, bro. I am pure Indian. There's no Russian descent in me. Come on. I don't know why people ask me this. Okay. Let's. Miguel Diaz says, why can't Indians dominate MMA like Dagestanis, Brazilians, and Americans? Look, in Brazil, there is a great tradition of these martial arts gyms and all that. And there's a lot of awareness. Like in India, everybody is crazy about cricket. So everyone wants to be a cricketer. In certain countries, it's all about MMA and mixed martial arts and fighting, combat sports. There's a craze for that. So everyone wants to go into that. And they have the facilities for giving young kids the right kind of training and the good coaching and all that. So who says Indians can't dominate that? It's not like Indians have inferior genes or anything. I mean, so if the same kind of craze for combat sports occurs in India, then you will have the mushrooming of gyms and training centers all across the country, right? And they will go and look for kids who are good at this. And then in a few years, you'll have an explosion of Indian martial artists. So that's the whole thing. In India, the craze is about cricket. So everyone wants to hold a bat, or mostly it's everyone wants to bat. That's the thing. So it's as simple as that. There is no awareness of MMA in India. Very little. Today, I think the awareness is growing. I have been following MMA for a long time, even before anyone knew about it. Yeah, so that's a deal. So in certain nations, you have this craze for MMA. And that's why those nations produce way more fighters than other countries. It looks like there's an overrepresentation of certain regions in MMA. It's because of this, nothing else. Let us see. There are lots of questions. Let me take something interesting. One second. Let me see. Quickly, I'll pick something. Okay, let's see this question from Tejas. Tejas says, it's speculated that Mitanni kings were of Indo-Aryan origin. How can that be when the local population used Hurrian? Can aristocrats and locals be of different origin? Think about the so-called Mughal Empire in India. Babar. What language did he speak? Doesn't even know. He spoke the Chagatai language, Chagatai, which is an extinct Turkic language. Think about the what's it called? The so-called Delhi Sultanate. When you had kings, little chieftains like Balban and Iltutmish, and that lady who was killed, Razia Sultan or whatever. What language did they speak? They spoke the Chagatai language, right? Was it an Indian language? It was not. What language did individuals like that guy Aurangzeb speak? They spoke Persian. Is that an Indian language? It's closely related to Indian languages, but it's a Persian language. It's Persian, right? So you have so many examples of the aristocracy, the ruling class speaking one language that is completely unrelated to the language of the people they rule over. 1,000 years ago, Anatolia, Turkey, today's Turkey, the Turks started infiltrating into this region and they established kingdoms there. They spoke Turkic languages. The locals spoke the local Anatolian language. Once again, the same thing. When the Europeans conquered North America, what language did the locals speak? The natives. They spoke the local Native American languages, but the people who were ruling them spoke either French or English. Look at Australia today. What language do the natives speak? They speak local Australian Aboriginal languages, but the people who are ruling over them speak a European Germanic language, English. I can give you a million examples. Okay, so that's how it happens. So it is not speculated that the Mitanni kings were of Indo-Aryan origin. It is known that the Mitanni aristocracy, the ruling class, was Indo-Aryan. How do we know this? Because we have evidence of this. We have a peace treaty between the Mitanni and the Hittites, which was found in the capital city of the Hittites. I forget the name. Hattusa. So they found this peace treaty on a clay tablet. And in this peace treaty, to seal the treaty, a number of gods are invoked. Mitra, Varuna, and so on and so forth. All Indian Vedic gods were invoked in that. Then there is a horse training manual that was discovered in this region. The horse master who wrote this manual for training war horses, his name was Kikuli. He calls himself Kikuli the Mitanni, and it's a great manual. It has been translated into English, and it can still be used today to train horses for war. Take a standard horse, and if you put him through this, and him or her through the entire training period, then you have a war horse, a well-trained war horse. In this training manual, which is written in the local Hurrian language, the author of this training manual, there were certain terminologies and terms, technical terms, that he had to use to make the training manual worthwhile, but there were no words for those terms in the local Hurrian language. So he had to use his own native language for that, and his native language was Sanskrit. So it's the first example we have of Sanskrit being used. It's the oldest known example of Sanskrit in literature, in the archaeological record, which strangely is beyond India. It's in present day Syria. Yeah. So this guy Kikuli, in his horse training manual, he used various Sanskrit terms because those terms did not exist in the Hurrian language. So clearly, his native language, his indigenous language was Sanskrit. So that's what. So we have evidence that the aristocracy of the Mitannis, they were of Indian origin, Indo-Aryan origin, like they say, and the locals used the Hurrian language. So that's what happened. All right. We're going to the very basics now. ABCs. Are Aryans originally Indians? Or it's a statement. Aryans are originally Indians. There is no such thing as Aryans. Okay. For us in the Indian subcontinent, Arya was a term that denoted a civilized person. You call somebody Arya, it's like calling somebody sir today. So a person who is well behaved, who is civilized, who is, of that sort of standard and caliber was called an Arya person. And our cousins, the Persians, who were of Indian origin, and long ago they went out of India in the aftermath of the Battle of the Ten Kings, which was actually more than 10 kings. I'll not go into that. So then the Persians eventually they went west of India and settled down where we know. I don't have to show the map for that. So they started using the term Arya as an ethnic term, as an ethnic self-designator, that we are the Arya people. Okay, but in the subcontinent, it was not used as an ethnic term. It was used as a term that denoted a civilized person, a cultured person, a refined person. So that's the deal. So the Persians eventually started using Arya as an ethnic self-designator, and then the Europeans, once they discovered India and Sanskrit and all that, then they stole the term. They stole the term, and then they created this fiction that the Aryans are of European Nordic origin and all that. So yeah, that's the deal with this. Okay. Um, Garvit Saini says, do you think the Indian educational institutions can match or possibly surpass global standards, possibly attracting international students here? If yes, how far off is it? When I was a little kid, you used to have students who came to Indian universities, students from Eastern Asia, from Southeast Asia, students from Africa. So those days, there was a certain standard that the Indian education system had. And before 2004, 5, whichever year that was, before then, the IITs were often in the top 10 of technological institutions worldwide. And then something happened and the education system was totally ruined. Um, so, yes, eventually, Indian education institutions, if we reform the education system thoroughly, they can once again be the best in the world. I mean, historically, who started universities? We did, our ancestors did, you know, Vishwavidyalayas and all that, the great universities of Nalanda, Vikramshila, Udantapuri, Tilhara, Takshashila, so on and so forth. So many. It all started in India. We had the best education system in the world. People from all over the world used to come to India for education. Xuanzang and so many examples. Yeah. And today, what we are following is the colonial education system. It is designed to ape the West, and it's going to take time to reform that. We're going to have to reform ourselves deeply, starting with the Indian Constitution and the laws and the governance system, and much, much more. So yeah, say it's going to take time, but eventually we can do it. We can be the best in the world once again. Yes, indeed. Manasi says Chagatai. Yes, that's indeed the name of the language which no longer exists. It was also the name of one of Genghis Khan's sons. His which son was it? Second son. The oldest was Jochi. Of course, his parentage was kind of uncertain. The second was most likely Chagatai. The third was Ogedai, and Ogedai became the next emperor. Anyhow, yes, Chagatai is the language. Correct. Um, Pranay Kumar says, is life just about survival and entertainment? Well, that is the Charvaka perspective, Charvak perspective. There are various schools of thought in Indian philosophy, philosophical schools of thought. One of the schools is the Charvaka school of thought, or the materialistic school of thought, which says that the world that we see is the only world that exists, and the aim of life is to enjoy the fruits of the world and the resources available to you, and maximize your enjoyment and pleasure and consumption and enjoyment of the worldly pleasures, and there's nothing beyond that. That's the Charvaka worldview. So from that perspective, life is about entertainment and pleasure and survival. So yeah, that's a valid school of thought in Indian philosophy, even though it's with all due respect, the stupidest and dumbest school of thought. But yeah, so it's up to you. It's your choice what school of thought you want to follow. If you adhere to the Charvaka philosophy, then life is about entertainment, enjoyment, survival. That's it. But if you adhere to a different school of thought, then it's about something else, maybe something more than that. So it's up to you. Who am I to tell you what is right, what's wrong? You decide what's best for you in life, right? Okay. All right, here we go. Arjun Tiwari, please pick me. Well, you're picked, sir. Wish to know about R1b haplogroups prevalence in India. I did my ancestry DNA test and found that my paternal haplogroup is a subclade of R1b. Interesting. Okay. So the okay, first of all, to everyone who's watching, in case you're wondering what's a haplogroup, a haplogroup is a bloodline. A haplogroup is a lineage. You can have two kinds of haplogroups: patrilineal haplogroups and matrilineal haplogroups. Patrilineal haplogroups are passed on. The genes for that haplogroup, the mutation, is passed on from father to son through the Y chromosome in your DNA. And the matrilineal ones are passed on through the mitochondrial DNA from mother to offspring, men as well as women. Okay, a mother will pass on her mitochondrial DNA to sons as well as daughters, but it's only the daughters who pass it on to their offspring. So that's how it goes. So when a male has a child, he's not going to pass on his mitochondrial DNA to the child. Only the patrilineal DNA, the Y chromosomal DNA. So what's a haplogroup? A haplogroup is a group of individuals living today who all share a specific genetic mutation that happened in the past. Okay. So for example, you have the R1A haplogroup. Let's talk about a more specific haplogroup, R1A1A. That's most likely an Indian origin haplogroup that is about between 18 to 25,000 years old. And the number of people who carry this genetic mutation today, all males, they are more than 1 billion today. And they are found across Eurasia. A huge concentration in Europe and a huge concentration in the subcontinent. So that's what a haplogroup is. It's an extended family of individuals who all are descended from a single ancestor who was the originator of a specific genetic mutation. Now, Arjun is talking about R1b. R1b is not that prevalent in India, which is interesting. Okay, let's go and check out the map of R1b. Give me a second. R1b map. Let's go to images. Okay, let me put this on the screen. Shall I? R1b map. So where is R1b prevalent worldwide? As you can see, it's not that prevalent in India. It's kind of it's kind of greatly prevalent in Western Europe. Some of it is prevalent in, as you can see, in this part of Russia. A large concentration in Africa, and very less in India. Strangely enough, when you come to R1A, like I said, it's different. Huge concentration in India, huge in Eastern Europe. So R1A and R1B are both descended from R1, the parent haplogroup. So R1 this is the European map, but it's all across. So if you include R1A and R1B, it will be all across Eurasia. So like I said, like we just saw, R1B is prevalent in Western Europe, but it doesn't mean that it would be completely absent in India. So Arjun seems to have a haplogroup that's quite rare in India, R1b. But that is not that surprising to me, because R1b is descended from R1, which is descended from R itself. And I believe it's going to emerge soon enough that R and R1 themselves are haplogroups that originated in India, in the Indian subcontinent or nearby. So from that perspective, it's not that surprising. But yeah, it's interesting that you have a haplogroup that's kind of rare in India. The R1b haplogroup was the haplogroup that was prevalent in the majority of the Yamnaya invaders who invaded Europe about 5,000 years ago, 4,500 years ago. And what the Yamnaya invaders did was that they completely replaced the male genetics of Europe. The female genetics persisted after the invasion, but the original male genetics were wiped out, which means this was a genocide, a population replacement event, only killing of males. Yeah, well, that's how history is. And the Yamnaya invaders, well, if you see their genetics, you can infer their skin color, hair color, eye color, and you will know that it will tell you that their skin color was not white; it was light brown. Light brown. Their hair color was brown. Their eye color was brown, and their hair color was dark. So and they were genetically sturdy people, roughly 6 feet tall on average, and muscular. Yeah, so that's the genetics that Arjun has. Nice. Right. Let's see. Helsing Hathor says, was Nalanda University destroyed by Khilji? Because some JNU professors on Twitter are saying it was Brahmins. I know that lady. Yeah, I'm aware of that. The JNU lady. Uh, so some people on Twitter are saying it was Brahmins who destroyed it. Is it just propaganda by JNU professors? Look at the original sources. Look at what the Tibetans have written about this. Various Tibetan. See, I don't have all the data right now that I can pull up and show you, but do your own research. There were various Tibetan travelers who came to India who wrote about what happened. One of them wrote who one of them came to India in the aftermath of the destruction of Nalanda. And when this guy comes to Nalanda, the university was destroyed, but there was still a single professor who was surviving, and he was still taking classes. This guy, this gentleman, his name was Rahul Shri Bhadra. This professor, he was in his 90s, and he was still trying to continue the classes and to teach students. Okay, and all these records, all these writers who came to India in the aftermath of the destruction, they all wrote about the fact that it was this guy Bakhtiyar Khilji who destroyed Nalanda. You see, Brahmins were not warriors. Brahmins were the preservers and transmitters of knowledge, and they were also advisors of kings and all that in certain cases. How can Brahmins destroy a university? So this is pure propaganda. I know at least one individual on Twitter who goes on and on about this. I don't know what drives these demented people. I'm not taking names, so all right. But yeah, there you go. So it was destroyed by Bakhtiyar Khilji, and the sad thing is that nearby there's a railway station called Bakhtiyarpur that honors that terrorist, that monster that destroyed Nalanda. So let it be very clear that Nalanda was destroyed by Bakhtiyar Khilji, the Turkic invader, who had destroyed much more. And when it comes to JNU, well, what can I say? What can I say? Um, okay, let's see what else. Shantanu Jha says India is weakest in its naval forces. What's your thought? Will it be able to counter China Navy force? This is a good question. It's a controversial question, but let's take it up. And there are lots of people who will disagree with me. Well, so be it. Can't please everyone. So I would not say that India has a weak navy, but when it comes to comparing the Indian Army, the Air Force, the Navy, I would say the Navy is kind of comparatively less well equipped and funded. That's what I would say. I think there's a whole lot more that we need to do when it comes to our naval forces. Look at India's position geographically. India has a geographical location that is a gift of the gods. India dominates the Indian Ocean region. We can reach out anywhere in this enormous part of the world because of our great naval location, right? So India should be a great maritime power. Historically, for thousands of years, we were a maritime civilization. But today we have what? A navy that is not that strong. The Chinese had a very weak navy in 1990. And then they started building more warships. And it took them time to improve their designs. Okay. But today they have possibly, definitely, the largest navy in the world. They are churning out warships, destroyers, frigates, cruisers, whatever, submarines. Like they're churning them out like sausages. And quantity has a quality of its own. It does. Even if your designs are not the best, if you have huge numbers, it's going to overwhelm any enemy. So when it comes to the numbers, okay, the Chinese navy is way, way, way larger than the Indian navy. You can go and look up the numbers. I'm not going to do it here. The problem that the Chinese face is that they are bogged down by they are hemmed in by the island chains. There are three island chains. One is Taiwan and all that. Second is the Philippines and others. The third is Guam and all that, the Mariana Islands. There are three island chains that encircle China. And there are these trouble spots from the Chinese perspective. One is a huge threat from Japan. Japan has a very scary navy, the scariest submarines, right? Uh, then you have South Korea, which is a US possession. So There's a huge US presence over here, which is a danger for China. Then you have Taiwan, which again is under US protection, a US ally. So there's a problem there. So the bulk of the Chinese Navy is deployed in the Yellow Sea, the East China Sea, and the so-called South China Sea, which is actually the Champa Sea. And the Chinese are also claiming this entire South China Sea region as if this entire thing is a private lake of China. So they have to deploy the bulk of their naval assets in this region, and that's why even though they have the world's most powerful navy, this, at least numerically, they still do not pose a great threat to India as of today. As of today, they have been deploying submarines in the Indian Ocean region, the Bay of Bengal. They have deployed submarines in the Andaman Nicobar Islands, on spying missions. They've deployed spy ships to track Indian missile launches and eavesdrop on Indian communications in the region. They have this port in Pakistan called Gwadar, which was once offered to India. India rejected it thanks to the great, magnificent Mr. Nehru, and they deploy submarines there as well. So they have a presence in this region, and they are slowly going to increase the presence. They also have this port in Djibouti, which I can actually show you. They have a Chinese. There is a Chinese port in Djibouti. Okay, I'll not go into the details right now because it will take time. The point is they're going to increase their presence slowly. So what does India need to do? We need to increase the numbers. We need to build more warships, more submarines. We need to invest in distributed lethality and also in numbers. Quantity has a quality of its own. We need to bolster the numbers of various kinds of warships, destroyers, uh, frigates, submarines, missile boats. Missile boats can be a deadly, potent weapon, and they're quite cheap. A missile boat is very cheap. I mean, you can build a missile boat if you are innovative for about 10-20 million dollars, which is peanuts, you know, and put three missiles on each boat. Brahmos missiles. Scary, scary, scary from the opposition's perspective. And you can put 100 missile boats out there to sea, or at least 30 or 40. And so, what India needs to do is focus on the navy, build large numbers of these assets. Of course, it's going to cost money, and we need more nuclear submarines, attack submarines, missile launching submarines. We need conventional submarines as well. See, I would say India needs at least 50 submarines. How many submarines do we have that are operational today? 12, 13? Guaranteed it's less than 20. For a nation of India's size, having 12 to 13 or 15 submarines is a joke. We need at least 50, ideally 100 submarines. Of course, it's going to cost a lot of money, but if you want to be safe, that's what you have to do. And there is this obsession. Here we go. This is the controversial part, and lots of people will disagree with me. There is this obsession in the Indian Navy for building aircraft carriers. I totally disagree with that. Of course, we have a couple of aircraft carriers. Good. But now use the money to build more of these assets. Distribute your lethality, don't concentrate it in one place. So that's what I would say. There's a whole lot that can be done and should be done. And I'm sure some of it is being done. But we need more. We need more. We always want to keep improving. We always want something better and something more. Okay. What do I think of Kurd ethnicity? Good ethnicity, Indo-Iranian or Iranian, whatever you want to call it. And they don't have their own nation. And that's why they are persecuted by the Turks, by the Iranians, by whoever else. And you had many great Kurds in the past. I mean, the Kurds, I think they were converted to Islam sometime around the time the Persians were converted to Islam after the Arabic conquest of Persia, which happened about, I don't know, 1300 years ago, roughly. And the Kurds also got converted, and then they produced people like Salahuddin Ayyubi and all that, some of the great heroes of the Islamic world. So yeah, that's what it is. So the Kurds are an Indo-Iranian or Iranian ethnicity, an ethnic group that doesn't have a nation of its own, and that's why they are deeply persecuted and marginalized. The Turks talk about Mr. Erdogan, the president of Turkey. He talks about the horrific persecution of the people of Gaza by the Israelis. What's he doing to the Kurdish people, by the way? What is he doing? Isn't he doing the same persecution? but no one talks about it. So that's the way the world operates. So yeah, that's what. Okay. Anitya says China has not intervened in any military conflict. They have not attacked any country in the last 50 years. On the other hand, we know how the US has intervened worldwide. Then why does China have such a bad global image? Okay. Um, when was the last time they attacked a country? 1979 was when they invaded Vietnam and they suffered a disastrous defeat. 79. So that's 20. So that's less than 50 years, my dear sir or lady, whoever you are. Yeah. So it's not true that China has not attacked any country in the past 50 years. Okay. They also tried to fight India in 1987 and they were defeated. Okay. So the what clash? Sundarang Chu clash or whatever. I don't remember what it was called, but there was a mini war in 1987. The Chinese tried in 1962 kind of thing and they were beaten back. Okay. The Chinese, let me tell you, they occupy Tibet. Tibet has never been Chinese. They are conducting a cultural genocide in Tibet. They have banned the Tibetan language. All schools, in every school, the kids have to do their education in the Chinese language. So eventually, it will wipe out the Tibetan language. And the Tibetan people are not allowed to practice their culture. There is a similar occupation of the East Turkestan region, which was never Chinese again. Half of Mongolia is currently under Chinese occupation. What you see of Mongolia is only half the nation. You see, these places, these regions are all part of what the Chinese call Inner Mongolia. North of Beijing is where Inner Mongolia starts. Okay, you have these mountains around that protect Beijing, that have historically protected Beijing. If I show you the terrain, you see these mountains that have historically protected Beijing. North of that is in Inner Mongolia, the Gobi Desert. So that is under Chinese occupation. And then you have Manchuria, which is not Chinese, again under Chinese occupation. The Chinese are claiming the South China Sea, which, I mean, what business do they have being there? It was historically the Champa Sea. Taiwan is a whole different issue. So the point is they and look at the number of border disputes they have. They have border disputes with all their neighbors. They're trying to bite away at little Bhutan. They have a huge undemarcated border with India. They claim Afghan territory. They claim Tajik territory. They claim Kyrgyz territory. They have reopened a border dispute with Russia in the east. Okay. They have a border dispute with Japan. I can just go on and on. How will a country like this have a good global image? Please explain to me. Please explain to me. How will a nation that behaves in this manner have a good global image? They use debt trap diplomacy to trap little nations like Sri Lanka, little nations in Africa. They're extracting wealth, resources out of Africa, which is okay, which everyone does. But they prop up dictatorships. They trap nations in these debt traps, then take over territory. They've taken over the Hambantota port in Sri Lanka. How can such a nation have a good global image? And of course, the Americans are no better. They actually are worse. You are right about this. You're right. Yeah. But the Americans control the global media. They control Hollywood. Watch Hollywood movies about American soldiers and American military operations. They always portray the Americans as the good guys, right? The media the English speaking media, the Western media is entirely controlled by Americans. And the Indian media simply copies what they write or say, right? So that's the deal. So that's why the Americans have a great reputation and the Chinese have a bad reputation. I'm not saying the Chinese bad reputation is unearned. It is well deserved. Yeah, the Chinese, they deserve their bad reputation. So yeah, there you are. Okay. Giuseppe Di Fraia says, what's your opinion, please, on Indira Gandhi, the former prime minister who was assassinated? Was she a good leader or bad leader of India? I know things are complex. Look, it's a good question. She was definitely a strong leader. Uh, she is the person, the leader who gave the go ahead for the liberation of Bangladesh in 1971. Right. So definitely she did many great things. Of course, she believed in socialism, and there's this book by Lee Kuan Yew. Okay, his memoir. There are a number of books in which you have Lee Kuan Yew speaking about various things. I don't remember which book it is, but I have some of those. In one of these books, he writes about in India, and he says that he visited India in the early 80s or something. Okay, and he met Mrs. Gandhi, and he told her that Indians who live in Singapore, they do tremendously well. They're extremely motivated. They're extremely they really do well. Indians, wherever they are across the world, they are really hardworking. They're very intelligent. They always rise to the top of the society, the top stratum in the society. They're very entrepreneurial. They're very innovative. And Indians in Singapore are among the most accomplished of Singaporean citizens. So, and it's because of the way our governance is. We allow people, we encourage them to rise to the fullest extent of their potential. Why don't you unleash the latent hidden power of India by reforming your economy and the nation? Why don't you do that? That's what he asked Mrs. Gandhi. Okay, and she said, "This is the way India is, and this is how it will be. This is how I want India to be." So she was perfectly happy with socialism. She was happy with continuing the Nehruvian legacy. Okay, so that's, I would say, one of the weak points, or if you are talking about pros and cons, that's one of the cons when it came to Mrs. Gandhi's leadership in India. But of course, she was very strong when it comes to national security. She was the one who gave the Indian army the go ahead to liberate Bangladesh. Without her go ahead, nothing would have happened, right? She was a hardliner when it came to combating Pakistan and all that. Of course, during her time, you had the Khalistan issue that cropped up and all. So there are pros and cons. Like you said, things are complex, but overall, I would not say that she was a bad leader. Yeah, yeah. So that's what I would say. Okay, okay. Let's. And of course, people will disagree, which is fine. You can disagree. Socialism was the need of the hour. Yeah. Okay. I disagree. I completely disagree. But yeah, there you are. The question is, what does socialism do? What happened after 1991? India was on the verge of bankruptcy. And the Indian government was forced to open up the economy and become less socialistic and more capitalistic. What happened? It totally unleashed uh, the entrepreneurial instincts of the Indians. And the Indian economy's GDP rise begins there. And after 2014, all the reforms that were done by Mr. Modi and his government, you can see the fruits of that coming in now. And you can see that India is the only economy that is not going to have a recession. It's the only economy that is projected to ever surpass the US. Yeah. So, what is that socialism that did that? If India had opened up its economy and invited investment and all that, and copied what Japan did or other nations did from 1947 itself, then India would have been one of the top three economies in 1991 itself. So, so this I do not agree with respect. Um, Costa Pence says, "Will the US and Russia start nuclear testing again?" What's your take on it? I don't know. I think if one of them does it, then the other will also do it. I don't think they need to do nuclear testing because they've done hundreds, if not thousands, of nuclear tests already. Their nuclear weapons are well calibrated. They know exactly how to get things done. So I don't think there's any need for them to do nuclear testing. If they do, if any of them does a nuclear test, it will be a political statement, not something that is actually needed or necessary. And if one of them does it, then the other one will also most likely do it. I think Mr. Putin has actually stated this recently in the past few months, sometime, that if the US does a nuclear test, conducts a nuclear test, then Russia will go ahead and do the same. So yeah, so I don't know if they have any need to do it, but if it happens, it's going to be a political statement more than something that happens out of technological necessity. Mohit Rana says, "My haplogroup is R RY7. In one of your videos, you spoke about the out of India migration. It's the same haplogroup as the Malta boy from Siberia. Also, I'm a Jat, so now you have me confused. Look, when we talk about out of India migration, it's one big wave or multiple big waves. But a migration is not never a linear process. You have multiple waves of migrations. And I never said that it's not possible that there was some migration into India. We know that even during the look, there's not sure if the map is needed right now. We know that even during the Saraswati Sindhu era, the Harappan era, there are there is the possibility that many of the people whose bones are found in various cemeteries from that time, from 5,000 years ago, many of them could have represented first generation immigrants to India. When you have a region, a civilization that accounts for, let's say, a half of the world's GDP, which is incredibly prosperous, technologically advanced, great standards of living, everybody wants to migrate there. That's what everyone does, wishes today. Everyone wants to migrate to the US, right? Because that's the place where you have the highest standards of living and all that. So in the ancient days, it was this region, the Saraswati Sindhu region. So everyone wanted to migrate to this region. Then people would have migrated from neighboring regions. Yeah. So you will have the exchange of genetics that happens like this. So it's and see the haplogroup you're referring to, RY7, it's a descendant of R. R is most likely an Indian origin haplogroup. See, when it comes to the matrilineal haplogroups that are prevalent across the world, 95% of non-African females who are alive today are descended from the matrilineal haplogroups M and N. M and N. These two matrilineal haplogroups originated in the Indian subcontinent between 60 and 70,000 years before today. That's how old they are. And you will have descendants of that all across the world. So yes, you will have relatives of so there will be ladies in India, most of them, who will be related to ladies across the world who are not of African origin. So that's how it is. It's really complex. So when it comes to the R haplogroups and descendants like R1, R2, RY, whatever, these are all descended from an ancient haplogroup R, which most likely originated in the subcontinent. So if you have this boy in Siberia, this mummy who was found who have this haplogroup, it means that further back in time, his ancestors also would have originated probably in the Indian subcontinent. So that's how I know it's very confusing. Genetics is very confusing. All these haplogroups and all this terminology is like that. The thing is, if you examine, it's about the lens that you use to examine history. Lens as in the time period. If you look at history from the perspective of the last 200 years, you will get a certain picture of history. If you examine history from the perspective of the last 1,000 years, which is a different lens, you will get a different image. If you look at it from the lens of the past 5,000 years, you will get a different picture. If you examine it from the perspective of the last 60, 70,000 years, you will get a whole different picture. So it all depends on which time period you're looking at. So this Malta boy, let me see how old that mummy is. Malta boy. Malta Bharat culture. Okay, let me put that on the screen and we'll take a look at it together. Okay, so I'll once again just take a look at Wikipedia just for convenience. So this is okay, 23,000 years before present. Okay, so it's not that old. The R haplogroup is older than that. So there you go. See, the history we're talking, when we talk about genetics and haplogroups, we're talking about tens of thousands of years. Tens of thousands of years. So this haplogroup, which was found in this boy, it is a descendant of older haplogroups. Okay, and R is way older. Let's see how old Wikipedia says R is. Just let me quickly go there. Haplogroup R. Let's see what it says. Haplogroup. Once again, why empty DNA? I want to see R1A. Indian origin of pattern. Oh, that's R1A. Haplogroup R1A is descendant of R1, which is descendant of R. So haplogroup R is about 27,000 years old, and its probably place of origin is probably the subcontinent or maybe northern Asia, like they are saying. Most likely the Indian subcontinent. So the haplogroup R is an ancestor of this haplogroup RY7, and haplogroup R is about 20,000 years old, at least, roughly, let's say. So it's older than the RY7. So that explains the whole situation now, doesn't it? So it all depends on what time frame you're looking at to examine a certain issue. All right. Um, okay, Polomi says, Saloniji, there was no country concept anywhere in the whole world. Okay, this is a conversation that's going on in the chat, but let me speak about this. The nation state concept that we are very familiar with. We only think about, let's go to the map of the world. When we think about the world, we think about nations, we think about countries, right? We think of India as a country, we think of our neighboring countries as Pakistan and Nepal, and then we have countries. All these lines on the map denote various countries. Historically, there were no nations, there were kingdoms, empires, and civilizations. The nation state system is an artificial and recent concept. It dates back to the Treaty of Westphalia 200-300 years ago. That's it. Okay. So historically, the concept of countries and nation states did not exist. It's an artificial concept. It was This concept was created to divide the world up for colonization uh, by Europe. It's a European concept. It's not a global concept. But today, it's seen as a universal concept because the whole world is currently under this system. Well, you are now witnessing the slow re-emergence of civilization states and empires. China is an empire. Okay, China is an ancient civilization, about 3,000 years old. Okay, let's say 3,500 years old if you want to be nice to them, but it's an empire. Okay, Russia also is an empire, by the way. The actual homeland of the Slavic people, the Russians, is Western Russia. All of this that you have in Russia today, it is Siberia and Asia, all the way to the far east of Russia. Okay, so all that is imperial conquest. It's the consequence of imperial conquest. So Russia is the it carries the legacy of the Russian Empire, and China is a modern day empire, and the US is also an empire, by the way, but we call it a superpower. So the term superpower is a euphemism for empire. So the country concept, the nation state concept, is an artificial concept. It's a very recent concept. It's never been there in history, and I think it will soon disappear in the next 50 to 100 to 200 years. Yeah, that's what could happen. Saurabh says, what makes Sanskrit the best natural language? What uniqueness did it have that others did not? Our so-called great social reformer, Mr. Ram Mohan Roy, says it's inferior. Yes, Mr. Ram Mohan Roy has written about this. He wrote a letter to the British occupiers of India saying that Sanskrit is an inferior language and it needs to be smashed out of existence and replaced with this great, superior, enlightened language called English. That's what Mr. Ram Mohan Roy wrote. He was, uh, yeah, he was greatly opposed to Sanskrit. He believed it was inferior. See what's unique about Sanskrit? It's the oldest known Indo-European language. Okay, there are people who will say that no, Sanskrit is only so and so years old, and whatever language in the Middle East region was older. That's nonsense. Okay, uh, yes, he was a Freemason. That's right. You got it. You got it right. Let's go back to where is the question once again? It's gone. Okay, so the point is, Sanskrit is the oldest known Indo-European language. It's an extremely rich language with a ridiculously rich vocabulary. There are more than 100 words for the term. See, in English we have one word called love. In Sanskrit, there are more than 100 words that can be approximated to mean love. Okay, sneha, prem, and lots of words. So it's an incredibly rich vocabulary. And each of these terms has slightly different meanings that the English language simply doesn't have the ability to express. Uh, so yeah, it's a, it's an incredibly rich language, and that tells you how ancient it is. The older a language, the more synonyms and richness it will have, and so on. So that's the thing about it, and it's got a beautiful grammar, a completely mathematically algorithmic grammar, and that was created by the great Panini, of course, more than 2,000 years ago. And before that, you had an older versions of Sanskrit, like post Vedic Sanskrit, Vedic Sanskrit, and even pre Vedic Sanskrit, which we are not really uh, very familiar with. So yeah, that's how it was. That's what I can say. Now, um, Aryan Surti says thoughts on Vivek Ramaswamy. Very interesting guy. He's a very smart guy. He's a very young guy, first of all, Indian origin guy, Hindu guy, who speaks about the fact that he's Hindu. He doesn't try to hide that, and he's a very smart guy. I think he's planning to run for president in 2028 or beyond. Right now, his aim is to become nationally relevant in the US, maybe globally relevant, and maybe run as the vice presidential candidate for Donald Trump. I think that's his objective. And you will see that he makes it a point to never criticize Donald Trump ever. And he goes after people in his own party and in the Democratic Party. So very smart guy. He's playing the long game. He's extremely articulate. He's a great speaker. He's always on the point. He can demolish any stupid question or argument. So yeah, very interesting guy. I think he's hoping to run as the vice presidential candidate, as the partner for Donald Trump in Donald Trump's presidential bid in 24. So that's what I think he's doing. Very interesting guy. Okay. Um, Damini says there was no life on Earth for a long time. Is it possible that the moon, Mars, and other planets on which we are trying to search for life, these planets are facing similar atmospheric conditions in the present? So the moon is not a planet, it's a moon, it's a satellite of the Earth. And the most prevalent theory that we have of the origin of the moon is that in the early phase, in the very early period of the full solar system, when you had the planets were still like molten blobs of rock or thereabouts. So in the very early phase of the solar system, there was a collision between Earth and another planet, which no longer exists. So these two planets collided. It was a glancing collision, and lots of debris were thrown into orbit around the Earth. And within a month or two, this debris, all this debris, they coalesced together and formed what is now the moon. Okay, so the moon is a satellite of the Earth. It's tidally locked in. That's a different story. When it comes to Mars, we know that Mars once had. So how old is the solar system? 4 something billion years old, and we know that life has existed on Earth, unicellular life, at least 2.7 million years before today. Yeah, we know that Mars once had flowing water. We know that Mars once had oceans of H2O, water. Okay, so Mars was very different in the past. And what happened to Mars is that it is a smaller planet, so it lost its magnetic field because the interiors of the planet cooled down. And in for Earth, we have this huge molten core, which is mostly metallic, nickel, iron, and it has very different properties from metal that we have on the surface. It is under extreme pressure, and it is charged, and it is these moving charges that cause that create the electromagnetic field of the Earth, which shields our atmosphere from solar radiation, from the solar wind. Mars lost its magnetic field, because of which the solar radiation was able to impact the atmosphere and the oceans of Mars and stripped all this away over a long period of time. So that's why Mars lost its atmosphere and its oceans. We still have frozen water on Mars, lots of it below the surface and also in the polar regions, right? So it's possible that there may have been life on Mars a billion or so years before today, or maybe even before that. It's possible. And we may have found some circumstantial evidence for that. Yeah. So Mars was very different in the past. Today, it's a mostly dry planet with a thin atmosphere. So yeah, it's changed over time, and the Earth also will change over time. The next few billion years, the Earth will be very different from where it is today, and the Sun itself will be different. So that is how it goes. The solar system will evolve. The Sun will eventually become a red giant. It will engulf the orbits of Mercury, Venus, and the Earth. Only Mars will be left out, and eventually the Sun will shed off its external layers when the nuclear reactions fizzle out, and it'll create a big nebula around itself. And what will be left at the center, where the Sun is a white dwarf. Okay, and the Earth will be burned to a cinder. That's what will happen eventually in about 5 billion years from today. So that's how a stellar system typically evolves over time. Okay, any updates about World Cup finals and Khalistani threats? I have not heard of any Khalistani threat to the World Cup final. But yeah, the final match is tomorrow. So yes, go India. We're going to win. We're going to win, and we're going to take revenge on the Australians for 2003. I watched that final match, 2003. Yeah. And it was not a good experience. So this is a very different team India this time. So I hope we win tomorrow. I follow sport. I am a huge sport fan. I not just cricket, but I watch hockey. I watch martial arts, football, all of that. Kabaddi. I like kabaddi as well. Great sports. So I hope India wins tomorrow. Yes. Okay. What else do we have? Okay. Manoj Kumar says, why can't we state facts as our opinion on Mr. Gandhi in CBSE board exams? Why would we have to only praise him just to get marks? Facts are facts, and they aren't, even if they aren't written in history in NCERT textbooks. Facts are facts, but your examiner is going to fail you if you write what is not in the textbooks. That is the problem with the Indian education system. You may have knowledge that is superior to what's written in the textbooks, but you have to pretend to be stupid and not know anything and only write in the exams what's in the textbook. I have faced such idiotic teachers. I mean, their slavish devotion to textbooks is so incredibly frustrating. I remember, which standard was I in? Seventh or something? I don't know which standard it was. We had this subject called science. Okay, science. In there was a science textbook, and there was some kind of scientific circuit diagram or apparatus or something which was in one of the lessons, and that came up in the question. So I drew the diagram from my memory and my understanding, and I drew it in a different way from what was in the textbook. And my teacher, she gave me 0 marks. She said it's not exactly as per what is in the textbook. It was completely correct from a physics perspective, but it was not an exact copy of what was in the textbook, and she gave me 0 marks for that. She was stupid. Okay, this teacher. I mean, there are so many examples and incidents like everybody, all of us would have. So we have to understand that our teachers and our education system are still fully colonized. Okay, and if you write truths, then you're gonna be failed in the exams. So that is where we are today. So if you wanna, so you can either fight the system and be beaten by it, or you can use the system to get ahead in life and then speak the truth on a bigger platform than in the exam. What's the point of trying to speak the truth in the exam? You won't get marks, and you won't get what your objective is, which is your degree or whatever. So I think we have to be realistic and practical in life. We know what the truth is, but to treat the education system and exams as a tool that will allow you to get ahead in life. Yeah, so it's the way it is. Ideally, you should be able to state facts, but that's the way our system is. It's still very backward. What's the point? What's the point? It's so long ago. It doesn't matter anymore. There are a million teachers like that. You all have to deal with them. Yeah. I mean, okay, last time I didn't answer. You see, during a live stream, I get maybe 2,000-3,000 questions at least. I can answer 20 or 30 of them. So I apologize to those of you whose questions I'm not able to answer. I really appreciate that all of you ask so many questions, but this is what happens. Do you believe the concept of Satyug in our solar system was closer to a superstar, super sun, all that? Look, the Yuga system is very interesting. Okay, um, I- was the solar system close to a superstar? There have been stars that have come close to the solar system. Okay, in the past, I mean, about 80,000 years ago, there was a star called Barnard star, which is right now very dim and faint, but it once passed very close to the sun, like just a handful of light years away. It may be even it may be even interacted very closely with the solar system, and it may have influenced certain events in the solar system. So these things happen. It was not a superstar; it's just a regular star. Uh, so it's happened. It would have definitely happened in the past that our solar system came in close proximity with other stars, and it would definitely have affected the evolution of our solar system. So that is what I can say about this entire matter. But that's an event. The nearest event was about 80,000 years ago. So that is way, way, way before any of these historical events that we can think of, like the Ramayana, Mahabharata, etc., happened. So I'm not sure if there is any correlation. Mahfuz Rahman Saurav says, where did Europeans come from before the Indians invaded them? Was Iranian Neolithic farmers originally from Iran, or were they also out of India migrants? That is still an open question. Okay, there is genetic research that is currently being done within India, outside of India. There is the what golden crescent theory or something, fertile crescent or something. Some the latest one of the latest papers, which says that the origin of the Indo-European languages was further east, maybe in present-day Iran. So earlier it was Eastern Europe, then it became Central Asia. Now they have moved to Persia. Give it a decade, it will move into India. That's the thing. Okay, so uh, it's a very complex topic. Where did Europeans come from before Indians invaded them? Look, about 10, 15,000 years ago, the people who lived in Europe had dark skin and blue eyes. Weird. Okay, the genetic mutation for fair skin and blue eyes, no, sorry, the genetic mutation for fair skin and red hair or blonde hair, it only originated about 10 or 12,000 years before today, and that too originated most likely in either Persia or India. Okay, so the fair skin that we see in Europeans today, it came from further east, but it suddenly somehow became more prevalent there because of whatever reasons. uh so yeah, the ancestors of today's Europeans obviously are a mixture of the females who lived in Europe long ago and the Yamnaya invaders who came from further east, let's say. Okay, so yeah, it's all of this is still a subject of research, great amount of research. There is still, from a genetic perspective, a great lack of clarity, and this is something that's going to keep on. Research is going to continue. It's going to take maybe 10, 20, 30, 50 years perhaps to have way more clarity on this matter. But it's clear that a large amount of the genetics of Europe came from further east, most likely from the Indian subcontinent. The genetic mutation for fair skin also emerged about 10 or 12,000 years ago, most likely in the subcontinent. But most of that, those genetic components went further west into Europe. The Iranian Neolithic farmers are now supposed to be the originators of the Indo-European languages. Well, that is still a work in progress. So it's going to take time to get more clarity on that. Were they out of India migrants? Time will tell. Still unclear. Okay, we have crossed 2 hours, almost 2 hours, 10 minutes. I'll take one last question. Um, okay, what shall I take? What shall I take? What shall I take? Um, Vastavik says, were the Khaljis Heptalites, Turks, or Afghans? They were Turks. The Heptalites, the Shweta Hunas, they came, they invaded, they were nomads who most likely originated further east from India, and they tried to invade India about 1600 or 1700 years before today, during the end phase or the second phase, latter phase of the Gupta Empire. And at the same time, they were invading Rome successfully, the Roman Empire. When it comes to India, they kind of failed. But of course, after the Gupta Empire declined, the Heptalites were able to, the Shweta Hunas were able to conquer northwestern India, which is present day Afghanistan and Gandhar and all that. And they became Indians, they became Hindus, and some became Buddhists. And then they defended India from the Turks, the Hindu Shahis. Yeah, so the Khaljis were, and Afghans, well, the Afghans were also Indians, Gandhar, right? So the Khaljis were Turks. They were neither Heptalites nor Afghans. They were Turks. All right, that is the last question for today. I apologize to those of you who have asked so many questions and I was not able to answer them. Apologies, but thank you for all the questions, and we will keep on doing this, and I'll hopefully answer everyone's questions eventually. So thank you for thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next session. Take care, and like I always say, keep raising your standards and keep working hard into reaching your true potential. Thank you so much, and I will see you next time. Have a good day, good night, wherever you are. I'll see you later. Thank you.